join me. We're going to go up into outer space to planet Nibiru, whatever it's called. We're going to go up there and see if this is all true. So let's go. It's a long ways, so hang on. Wow, look at that. Look at the planet up there. Holy smokes, let's take this back to our studio. Okay, we'll see you in a bit. Well, we made it. So that was a crazy trip out there. But let's share some of these experiences from the planet Nibiru. Nibiru? Whatever. We'll learn about it in a few minutes. See ya. Well, I hope you hope you enjoyed the introduction there. Welcome to the Saturday Sex Show. Sorry about the introduction there. We had a little glitch when I first put the live on, and then I just reissued the live, so I don't see anybody on yet, so I kind of hopefully didn't mess things up too hard here, but we are in a rural connection here. So yeah, okay, I see someone there. STR, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I had a little bit of a trip there from the planet Nibiru. So we have SDR on now. I did do a video earlier on the Anunnaki. It's the same thumbnail that you'll see behind me, the Anunnaki to Jehovah, or to Yahweh. So maybe you have watched it, maybe you have not watched it. If you have watched it, let me know on the chat, because I'm going to use some of the same information here today, especially if you have not watched the previous video. So hello to Marnia Thorn, I'm watching. Blue Rose, hi. So have any of you guys seen the video here that I just released today? If you could let me know. If you haven't seen it, just say no on the chat, and then I can I'll know where I'm going to go with this live. But has anybody heard of the Anunnaki? The Anunnaki. There's been a lot of shows, I guess, on the internet, on TV, on history channels. Ancient aliens, ancient astronauts. The Anunnaki is a name that is traced back through the ancient Sumerian. So yeah, so SDR, you have not heard of this Anunnaki. This is something brand new. To a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, Marmy, you said you do. Perhaps you've heard of it. Blue Rose, yes, I've heard about them. So I've kind of heard about them back probably 10, 12 years ago. I had a Bible study up in the Arctic of Canada, and all you really do up there is you get a good satellite signal in the winter, and it's very cold out, so you sit in and you watch. You subscribe to different channels. So one of my Bible studies, or probably my only Bible study I had up there, I used to go up there and even stay overnight at his place, but we became better friends when I actually quit the organization. And when I quit the organization in 2012, I kept going up north because I had all these work contracts, and I had accumulated work contracts, and that's what ended up paying my trip to go up to all these remote communities. And what I did for work is I was a fire alarm technician. So I would go in and test out fire alarm systems. And I even did extinguishers and emergency lights, all the safety systems. So I've been in the safety business my whole life since I was 19 years old. I got involved with fire alarms. And then eventually I branched out and went on my own. I started my own company. And I ran that company for some 28 years. And then after I sold the company, when I went through a divorce and left the Jehovah's Witness religion, so that was a big year, 2012. My dad died, and I had sold the business, sold everything, and went through this divorce. And it was an interesting time in my life. So I went through all of this, and I kept the only thing that I sold my company. It was called Fire Tech. I sold it, and that the owners did not want to buy anything. They didn't want the Northwest Territories, even though they owned it. They said you can have it. So I kept going up north to the Northwest Territories, and it's a lot of little indigenous villages in Canada. And the Watchtower called these territories unassigned. So they would send a letter out every once in a while and say, hey, anybody want to work unassigned territory at your own expense? You can go up. And so when I signed up to go up, the elders they wouldn't sign me or endorse me. My local body of elders wouldn't endorse me to take on this territory. So I always had to hire an elder, and I'd hire some elder outside of the congregation, and he'd come with me. He'd sign out the territories from his congregation. He'd sign them out, and we'd go up and work these territories. And I'd come back with like 50, 100 Bible studies, all these placements. And the local elders got very jealous. And they got so jealous that they eventually gave a talk. They went up to a fringe territory, and they came back, gave a talk, and said to the whole congregation that no one should really go to these territories. They're dangerous. And yet the society wanted us to work them. Like, I was confused, but it was jealousy, and it happens right within the what you'd call a Christian congregation. It's not supposed to happen there. But anyways, carrying on to the Anunnaki, this one Bible study I had, we remained friends, and I quit studying with them. And I had to keep going up to these contracts. So I went up from 2012 all the way up to 2018. For another 5 years or so, I kept going up. And they kept phoning me in these communities. And I wrote some books while I was up there because I was no longer a JW. So I started allowing my mind to explore things, and I wrote 5 books, and I have not published them yet. I published them in a sense. I sent them up to the local community, and they could read them. But I will eventually put them on my YouTube channel, and I will put them on Amazon or something. And they're interesting books. They're about my travels through the indigenous communities, and learning about some of their heritage, and that their heritage is not scary. It's the drum dances are kind of cool. If you ever have a chance to get involved with any of I think any of the North American indigenous, in fact, all over the world, in Australia, wherever the indigenous are left, I think it's a place to go. And you can really seek out some tranquility, some peace. You get to know the communities. They know how to live off the land. They fish, and they have smoked fish. And I have so many stories, so much information on this. In fact, one of the brothers wrote, I started journaling this, and he took my journals and published it kind of to all the congregations. And, he had a lot of fun as well. There's a lot of brothers that went up over the years. But this is part of what I'm fighting here in Canada. It's part of my human rights fighting, and my human rights petition went in because I feel that my human rights were infringed upon. And when I went up north, and I was honestly going up to help some people, and I had some good success. And I found that the organization hampered it, and they hampered it due to religious prejudices, religious, discrimination. Our religion is the only right religion. Like, as we know, Jehovah's Witnesses, the organization, let's not blame it on the people, but let's blame it on the governing body. They're very, very much afraid. They're afraid for any of us to go outside of the box and look at some of these things outside of the watchtower. They're really afraid. And back in 2012, I was just done with it, and I faded away. I just quit going. In fact, I sold my house. Well, I wanted out of that congregation so bad, and my kids left. And they did some cruel things, and I don't really want to get into a lot of it on my channel yet because I filed this human rights complaint, and I plan on seeing what happens with it. But what happened was really wrong, and wrong. I felt morally wrong for the people, how they were talked about, and how they were treated. The Watchtower wasn't interested in helping these communities. That's what I began to see. And I began to see that these elders and different ones that went up with me, they were just interested in counting time and coming back. And then I would sit in the big district assemblies, and I would sit there and watch other elders get up and reenact the work that I did up north because they didn't feel I was qualified. They didn't feel I had the credentials because my family, my kids perhaps, or my ex-wife or whatever, my family wasn't in order. My family wasn't perfect. And you got to have a perfect family. At least it has to look perfect. And I didn't believe in hypocrisy. I told my kids, I even put up an education fund for my kids. And I advertised it, and I started saving money up. I was working, and I put money in the bank, and each kid got so much money when they got to cash in this education fund. In Canada, you can do stuff like that, and it's kind of there's a tax benefit, and I did, for my kids. And my son became an electrician. He used it through schooling. If he wanted to be a doctor, or now he kind of wants to be a psychologist. He's away from the Jehovah's Witness. He's looking at pursuing a higher education because he wants to help people. He feels he can help people through a higher education. So now, how does this lead into the Anunnaki? Well, the Anunnaki and learning about some of the history here on Earth is really gaining a higher education. Getting outside of the Watchtower, we now can open up our minds and we can get a higher education. So we can delve into the history. We can delve into some of these Sumerian tablets. And what I didn't realize is that it wasn't until 1957 that they actually discovered these cuneiform tablets. We're going to look at this here in a video here shortly. And 1957, these scholars found this. Well, heck, the Bible was, as we know the Bible today, it was finished back in 998 CE, 900 years after Christ. When they really put it all together, they were doing it back in 300 or so. Constantine, they're forming the Bible that we know today. So when you and I look at the Bible, we have to trust that this book is from some invisible God, that there's something around us, some God. Like, how do you guys view God coming out of the Watchtower? Like, coming out of the Watchtower, for me, I was kind of viewing God the same thing, same way that I viewed it inside the Watchtower. And therefore, I would kind of, trust the Bible a lot, because that's all I know. But until I get outside, so it says my stream current bit rate's low, recommended bit rate. So I don't know if I have people inside. If people in my house and my family are in the house watching this stuff, shut all your stuff down. On my farm, I'm remote. I'm using wireless, and that's why I lost the signal to begin with, is because there's too many people on the farm here, I think, grabbing bandwidth and watching this program probably. But we can all watch this program later, or they can come right into the studio. If everyone in the farm wants to watch this program, come on into the studio, shut your phones off, shut your computers off, because I'm going to lose the audience here. I am getting a warning on my screen saying my bit rates are too low. So I hope everyone on my farm shut all their stuff down. We'll keep the program rolling. Hopefully I don't lose you guys. But getting back to the conversation, when we think of being in the Watchtower, we trusted the Bible, for the most part. And even getting out of the Watchtower, we still have that trust and that feeling that God is everywhere, that the Holy Spirit is all around us, and that we can feel it at times. We get this feeling. Now, to step outside of that feeling is stepping outside of our comfort zone. And we have to sometimes do that. And didn't we have to step outside of our comfort zone to become a Jehovah's Witness. I remember when I first became a Jehovah's Witness, I had to step outside of my comfort zone. My whole family was against it, my worldly family. And they even put together a meeting, a big family meeting, to knock some sense into me. And I that just pushed me further into the JW religion, is what that did. Because when they came to knock some sense into me, none of them could open a Bible. Not one of my family members knew how to open a Bible, to find a scripture, and explain anything. And at that time, I was just studying, and I could show them all kinds of things in the Bible that the Jehovah's Witnesses taught me. So, when we look at all of that and we put all of that aside, there was a benefit that we had when we were in the religion. We did gain some knowledge. We learned things about the Bible. Now, granted, there's 3 things we learned that were seriously wrong. And that's number 1, that's taking people's lives, like stopping people from taking medical treatment over a misread scripture. Blood. Number 2, shunning. The worst thing, they have to cancel the 10 commandments to honor father and mother, to shun. And the JWs do that. In JW.org, it says, no, we're not under the 10 commandments. And how can they say yes? But then they say, oh yeah, we're under Leviticus, we're under this, we're under that, we're under the Psalms, we're under all of this other stuff, but we're not under the 10 commands. So it's Jehovah's Witness religion has become a cherry-picking religion. And then the shunning, and what's the third one? The governing body. Worshipping the governing body is the biggest piece of idol worship on earth. We're worshiping them as idols because we're no longer trusting our own inner voice. We're trusting the governing body's inner voice. And by the way, there's an excellent connection now. So whoever on the farm, thank you for turning off your smartphones and things. My connection's really good. So that's great. So yes, Watchtower likes to extinguish one's heritage. They do. And no, Marnie saying, okay, I'm just following some of your comments here. So great. So here, who online wants to learn more about the Anunnaki on this video here, on this live today? Because I have about a 45-minute program. I can let it run right through if you haven't seen it already. And it's right to do with the Anunnaki to Yahweh. Now, if you don't know who the Anunnaki is is an advanced race of people. And this is all based on Zecharia Sitchin's book. He wrote his books, a series of books, 12 books. And he's no longer around, apparently, but he wrote these books. And all his life he studied the Sumerian tablets, all these tablets and writings that we were told from the Watchtower that this was all demonized. It was all Baal. Like we viewed all this as like Baal worship was a bad thing. We don't understand it, but we just listen to the Watchtower. Now, it's interesting. The Watchtower bases all their stuff on the Bible that we know today. So what this guy does, that I'm going to show you a video on, is he looks at the whole Hebrew Bible, and where the name Yahweh has come from. And the name Yahweh does have a beginning, and that's what everyone wants to know. Well, if Yahweh is the supreme God, the God all over, well, then how could Yahweh have a beginning? God doesn't have a beginning. So, these are some of the things in history, if we study history, that's going to come out. It's a bit scary for some of us because it can actually change our whole thinking around the Bible. Now, does it mean that we have to give up spirituality? No, not at all. I think, like for me, when I looked at all this stuff, it strengthened my spirituality. It made my spirituality stronger because now I know where the Bible came from. And then some of those questions that I had about God, for instance, how can God be a God of war and go in and just kill babies and all kinds of things, and the Canaanites? Yahweh came, the Israelites, the Hebrews came from Canaan, and these are people. Babies are innocent, but yet Jehovah is a God of war. But then you turn the page in the Bible and you hear Jehovah's a God of love. And then you turn the page in the Bible and, at the beginning, and well, Jehovah created everything. So Jehovah has done all of these things and carries all these different personalities, but the personalities don't flow. And when we're looking at, I look at some of the Watchtower Help Club. He covers a thing on slavery. And we covered one on my last video. If you haven't seen it, I covered one on there called Joe. And he talks about Joe and Stan and how Joe... you already seen that, sorry. But he talks about Joe and Stan, and that's an interesting story. But when we read the Bible, it starts to confuse us a bit, because God is loving in one sense, and then in the other sense, God is just killing babies, and we find that hard to understand. So I don't know about you, but for me, stepping outside of the Watchtower is a good time for me to step outside of the Bible. Where did the Bible come from? I want to know a little bit more. Where did Yahweh come from? And if there's information out there on the market, I kind of want to know about it, and especially if it's a little bit newer information. So some of this information I'm about to show you, it comes from 1957, when these guys were going out and understanding some of this language, and now they put together some stories. So I'm going to take you to the next thing here is YouTube, and we're going to go over here. This is where I'm getting a lot of this stuff from, and it's an Anunnaki series, documentaries and movies. And the artist that put this together, he is, or the creator of this channel, and if you read about him, there's no email, there's no way of contacting him. And he kind of says, he shows himself, but you don't hear his voice. So all of the voice in these movies are not his voice. He's used a computer voice, and that's what if you look at some of his earlier movies, he actually explains that. So not everyone wants to be visible. Not everyone has a voice that is perhaps in English. Perhaps this person speaks another language, but wants to get this stuff out in English. I'm not sure. Everyone has a reason for staying hidden. I asked on a couple of, I've been watching a bunch of his stuff, and I've asked him if I can use it on my lives. He hasn't said no. I think he's trying to advertise it. And what I'm seeing in his videos all the way through, he's kind of saying, well, I'm not here to upset you. I'm not here to upset the apple cart, but, this is some of the history, So he realizes that this changes the narrative. So I guess the warning he gives, when you watch this stuff, it will change your narrative on the Bible. So that's my warning. I'm going to pass that back to you. For me, I actually want to change my narrative. And I've been in the Watchtower, which has been in the Bible for 30 years for most of my life. And even up until now, let's take right until now, 42 years. I have 42 years spent with my mind inside the Bible. So now I am stepping outside, and I am going to examine some of this stuff. And that's what I'm doing. And I think it's fabulous. So that's why I'm sharing it with you guys. So here we go. Let's look at any of the comments. You guys all ready to go? Enjoy this. I'm gonna set you up here to watch one of these shows. Here we go. Yeah. Okay. So this is off a video I just released, and that's not me, but we're going to start right here. This is right at the beginning, and I'm going to take my mic off. I forgot to turn the mic on, sorry. So I'll just rewind this a bit. I turned the desktop mic on.
God.
And explore the fascinating world of Yahweh and the Anunnaki. So there's the preface, there's the description in this video. And you can also look at the Anunnaki in Wikipedia. There's a link there. So we'll get right into the video, and I will disappear off the screen. Okay. So here we go.
The Bible, presents us with a God who seemingly single-handedly. In the vast expanse of human history, few questions have captivated our collective curiosity as much as the enigma of the divine. Among the pantheon of gods and deities that have adorned the chronicles of human faith, one name resonates through the ages: Yahweh, the biblical God. But who is Yahweh? This question, simple in its asking, unravels a complex tapestry of theology, history, and human civilization. The Bible, a cornerstone of Abrahamic religions, presents us with a God who seemingly single-handedly orchestrates the creation of the universe: planets, stars, animals, plants, humans, and everything that exists. This being is often understood as the one and all-powerful God, the Father of all creation. However, a closer examination reveals a specific proper name recurring throughout the Bible: Yahweh. The name Yahweh, laden with centuries of interpretation and theological discourse, is not just a name, it is a window into the evolution of human understanding of the divine. A testament to our ceaseless quest to comprehend the cosmos and our place within it. It is a name that has been etched into the bedrock of our collective cultural memory, shaping civilizations, influencing cultures, and guiding the course of human history. The exploration of Yahweh is not merely an academic exercise, it is a journey into the heart of human civilization, a quest to unravel the threads of our shared past. It is a voyage that takes us back to the cradle of civilization, to the ancient Near East, where the name Yahweh likely originated. It is here that we begin to uncover a narrative that is as fascinating as it is complex. Interestingly, as we delve into the ancient Near East, we encounter the intriguing possibility that Yahweh could have been influenced or even originated from the Anunnaki, a group of deities in ancient Mesopotamian cultures. The Anunnaki are often associated with creation myths and were revered as gods in Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian, and Babylonian traditions. The exploration of these questions uncovers a forgotten layer of ancient story, one that reframes the whole narrative of human beginnings. It reveals that hidden in plain sight in the pages of Genesis is an even more ancient narrative, one that has been obscured from the public for centuries by mistaken translation and the dogmas of the Church. As we reach the culmination of our journey, we will seek to answer the question: who is Yahweh, the biblical God? The oldest mention of Yahweh was attributed to the Moabite stone, also known as the Mesha stele. This monumental stone was erected by King Mesha of Moab around 840 BCE to commemorate his triumph over Israel. Inscribed on the stele, Mesha recounts his victory and claims to have taken the sacred objects dedicated to Yahweh, the deity revered by the Israelites, and offered them to Chemosh, the chief god of Moab. These objects were likely taken from the temple of Yahweh in Samaria, the capital of Israel at that time. Discovered in 1868 in present-day Jordan and published in 1870, the Moabite stone created significant excitement as the first non-biblical inscription mentioning Yahweh. The stele recounted a similar event to the biblical narrative in 2 Kings 3, where Mesha, the Moabite king, rebels against Israel. However, a crucial difference emerged. The stele claimed a victory for Moab, while the Bible maintained that Israel was the triumphant party. The interpretation of the Yahweh reference further reinforced the notion that Yahweh was exclusively the God of the Israelites. Mesha boasted of seizing the vessels associated with the Israelite God as tribute to his own god, Chemosh. This view suggested that Yahweh was distinctively worshipped by the Israelites alone. In 1844, the archaeologist Carl Richard Lepsius excavated the ruins of the ancient city of Soleb in Nubia, meticulously documenting the site. However, no excavation took place during his investigation. In 1907, James Henry Breasted visited the site, but did not engage in any excavation either. It was not until 1957 that a team, led by archaeologist Michela Schiff-Giorgini, conducted extensive excavations at Soleb. During their work, they discovered a reference to a group referred to as the Shasu of Yahweh at the base of one of the temple's columns in the hypostyle hall. This temple had been constructed by Amenhotep III, who reigned from 1386 to 1353 BCE. The mention of Yahweh in association with the Shasu indicated that this god had been worshipped by another people long before the events described in biblical narratives were believed to have occurred. The Shasu, described by the Egyptians as Semitic nomads, often regarded as outlaws or bandits, were listed among Egypt's adversaries on the temple column at Soleb. Additionally, they were mentioned in an inscription from the reign of Ramesses II as enemies of the pharaoh during the Battle of Kadesh. Given the Shasu's nomadic nature, attempts have been made to link them with the Hebrews or the Habiru, a group of dissidents in the Levant. However, these claims have been refuted. The Shasu were not Hebrew, and the Habiru appeared to be Canaanites who resisted conforming to local customs rather than a distinct ethnic group. The discovery of Amenhotep III's reference to the Shasu of Yahweh pushed the origins of this god further back in history than previously believed, and also hinted that Yahweh might not have originated from Canaan. This supported the theory that Yahweh was a desert deity adopted by the Hebrews during their exodus from Egypt to Canaan. Some scholars interpreted the descriptions of Yahweh as a pillar of fire at night and a cloud during the day, as well as other fire-related imagery in the book of Exodus, as indicative of a storm or weather god. Moreover, Yahweh's ability to guide Moses to water sources, Exodus 17:6 and Numbers 20, further reinforced the notion of Yahweh as a desert god. Nonetheless, it is widely accepted in modern times that Yahweh initially emerged as a minor deity in the Canaanite pantheon, specifically in southern Canaan, and the Shasu, as nomads, likely adopted the worship of Yahweh during their time in the Levant. Recent scholarship has prompted a reinterpretation of the Moabite stone, revealing that the people of Moab also worshipped Yahweh. Consequently, Mesha's reference to taking the vessels of Yahweh to Chemosh likely meant that he considered them the rightful possessions of the Moabites, rather than the spoils of conquering Israel and their God. The word Yahweh is not just a name, but a linguistic artifact, a testament to the times and cultures that birthed it. It's a word that carries with it the echoes of ancient civilizations, their beliefs, their languages, and their understanding of the divine. The name Yahweh, as we've discovered, is deeply rooted in the ancient Semitic languages. It's a name that resonates with the linguistic patterns of the region, patterns that are echoed in the languages of the Canaanites, the Israelites, and the Arabs. The name Yahweh, in its original form, was likely pronounced differently, reflecting the phonetic nuances of these ancient tongues. The grammatical structure of Yahweh is intriguing. It's a name that seems to be intrinsically linked to the verb to be. This connection to the verb to be suggests a sense of being, of existence, that is inherent in the name Yahweh. The meaning of the name Yahweh has been interpreted as He who makes that which has been made, or He brings into existence whatever exists, though other interpretations have been offered by many scholars. In the late Middle Ages, Yahweh came to be changed to Jehovah by Christian monks, a name commonly in use today. However, the name Yahweh is not just about existence, it's also about passion, about commitment. The name Yahweh could be derived from the Arabic language, indicating a passion or a commitment of the deity towards his people. This interpretation aligns with the frequent references in the Bible to Yahweh as a jealous God, a God who is passionately committed to his people. The name Yahweh, therefore, is not just a name. It's a declaration of existence, a testament of commitment, a proclamation of divine passion. It's a name that encapsulates the essence of the deity it represents, a deity who is passionately committed to his people, a deity who exists, who is. From being a local deity of the Midianites, a tribe that traced its lineage back to Abraham, Yahweh transformed into the sole deity of the Israelites. This transformation is mirrored in the evolution of the name Yahweh, a name that began as a reflection of a local deity's commitment to his tribe and evolved into a declaration of the one true God's existence and commitment to his chosen people. The name of this supreme being was considered too holy to be spoken. As a result, the consonants YHWH were used to remind one to say the word Adonai, Lord, in place of the God's name. This practice of using epithets in referencing a deity was common throughout the Near East. However, the origins of Yahwism remain shrouded in mystery. Even the final edited form of Genesis 2, Kings in the Bible, presents diverse views on the matter. Some passages trace the worship of Yahweh back to the earliest days of the human race, while others trace the revelation and worship of Yahweh back to Moses. The character and power of Yahweh were codified following the Babylonian captivity of the 6th century BCE, and the Hebrew scriptures were canonized during the Second Temple period, approximately 515 BCE to 70 CE, to include the concept of a Messiah whom Yahweh would send to the Jewish people to lead and redeem them. Yahweh, as the all-powerful creator, preserver, and redeemer of the universe, was then later developed by the early Christians as their God who had sent his son Jesus as the promised Messiah, and Islam interpreted this same deity as Allah in their belief system. As the Iron Age dawned around 1200 to 930 BCE, the Israelites in Canaan sought to distinguish themselves from their neighbors. In a bid to consolidate political and military strength, they elevated Yahweh above El, the supreme deity, and claimed him as their own. Yahweh's association with the forge and with imagery of fire, smoke, and smiting made him a fitting deity of storms and war. His character transformed from a deity of transformation to one of conquest. El, often referred to as the supreme god in the Canaanite pantheon, was a deity of immense stature and reverence. His influence was widespread, and his name was synonymous with divinity itself. El was the epitome of wisdom, authority, and fatherhood, often depicted as an elderly figure with a flowing beard, seated on a throne. His realm was that of justice, kindness, and compassion, and he was often invoked for blessings of fertility and prosperity. Yahweh, on the other hand, emerged from a more obscure background. Initially a regional deity associated with the wilderness and stormy weather, Yahweh's influence grew over time, eventually permeating the entire Israelite society. His rise was not without contention, but his followers were steadfast, and Yahweh's prominence continued to grow. The relationship between Yahweh and El is a complex one, marked by both conflict and convergence. There are indications that Yahweh was initially considered a lesser deity in the pantheon that included El. However, as Yahweh's influence grew, so did his stature. The lines between the two deities began to blur, leading to a period of syncretism where characteristics and roles were shared or transferred. One of the most intriguing aspects of this relationship is the potential role reversal that occurred. As Yahweh's prominence rose, there are indications that he began to adopt some of the roles and characteristics traditionally associated with El. This is particularly evident in the depiction of Yahweh as a compassionate and just deity, roles that were traditionally associated with El. The convergence of Yahweh and El is also evident in the linguistic analysis of their names and titles. The name El is often used in the Hebrew Bible as a generic term for God, and it is also incorporated into the names of various characters and places, indicating its widespread usage and significance. Similarly, the name Yahweh also appears in various forms.
Michael's biggest sale of the summer.
This story is extraordinary, especially if it's true. And it all started in the desert, just north of Las Vegas.
And combinations, further indicating a level of convergence between the two deities. However, this convergence was not without conflict. The rise of Yahweh led to a shift in the religious landscape, with a growing emphasis on monotheism. This shift was likely met with resistance from those who adhered to the traditional polytheistic beliefs, leading to a period of religious tension and conflict. Despite these conflicts, the eventual dominance of Yahweh is undeniable. Over time, Yahweh transitioned from a regional deity to the sole God of the Israelites. This transition was not just a simple replacement of one deity with another, but rather a complex process of religious evolution and transformation. This shift is evident in Israel's early poetry and narrative literature, where Yahweh is often portrayed as a militant figure. The Song of the Sea in Exodus 15, 1:18, and the Song of Deborah in Judges 5 are typical examples, praising Yahweh as the divine warrior who intervenes on behalf of his followers. It's suggested that Yahweh's status as the national god was primarily established in connection with Israel's wars. During times of peace, the tribes would have depended heavily on Baal in his various local forms to ensure fertility. But when they came together to wage war against their common enemies, they would have turned to Yahweh, the divine warrior who could provide victory. The image of Yahweh as warrior is prevalent throughout the Hebrew Scriptures, which later became the Christian Old Testament. Warrior imagery is also apparent in passages in the New Testament, which drew on the earlier works. In the early days of Israel, Yahweh was perceived as a warrior storm god, a deity of power and might who was deeply connected to the natural elements. This image of Yahweh was likely influenced by the surrounding Canaanite religions, which also worshipped storm gods. The Israelites, living in a region prone to violent weather phenomena, would naturally gravitate towards a deity that embodied these powerful forces. This practice evolved into worship of deities such as El, Asherah, Baal, Utu Shamash, and Yahweh, among others. In the early days of the Israelites in Canaan, the people practiced a form of ancestor worship, venerating the God of the father, or the God of the house, in addition to paying homage to their earthly ancestors. However, the worship of Yahweh was not confined to his storm god aspect. As the Israelites interacted with neighboring cultures and their religious practices, Yahweh's image began to evolve. He was increasingly seen as a god of fertility and abundance, a protector of those in the southern kingdom of Judah were increasingly moving towards monotheism, and the worship of Asherah was seen as a threat to this emerging belief system. The Israelite prophets, such as Elijah, vehemently opposed the worship of Asherah and other Canaanite deities, leading to violent conflicts and the eventual suppression of Asherah's cult. The worship of Yahweh in ancient Israel was also influenced by the political landscape of the time. The northern kingdom of Israel was more affluent and open to syncretism, incorporating elements from various religions into their worship of Yahweh. However, this practice was heavily criticized by the southern kingdom of Judah. which was moving towards an exclusive worship of Yahweh. The destruction of the northern kingdom by the Assyrians in 722 BCE marked a significant turning point in the worship of Yahweh. The refugees from the north were absorbed into the southern kingdom, bringing with them their syncretic religious practices. This influx of northern influences likely contributed to the further evolution of Yahweh's image and the development of unique Israelite religious practices. As the Israelites developed their community in Canaan, they sought to distance themselves from their neighbors and elevated Yahweh above the traditional Canaanite supreme deity El. However, they did not embrace monotheism at this time. The Israelites remained a henotheistic people through the time of the Judges and throughout the time of the Kingdom of Israel, approximately 1080 to 722 BCE. In 931 BCE, following the death of Solomon, the kingdom split in two and a new political entity, the Kingdom of Judah with its capital at Jerusalem, emerged in the south. The Kingdom of Judah, nestled in the southern part of the land of Canaan, was a place where the worship of Yahweh was deeply entrenched in the fabric of society. Here, Yahweh was not just a deity to be revered. He was the cornerstone of their identity, the divine guarantor of their destiny. The Judahites saw themselves as the chosen people of Yahweh, and this belief shaped their religious practices, their political decisions, and their cultural expressions. In Judah, Yahweh was perceived as a warrior god, a protector who would defend his people against their enemies. This image of Yahweh was likely influenced by the tumultuous times in which the Kingdom of Judah found itself. Surrounded by powerful empires and often caught in the crossfire of their conflicts, the Judahites looked to Yahweh for protection and deliverance. This belief in Yahweh's protective power was not just a spiritual conviction. It was a tangible reality that shaped their military strategies, their diplomatic relations, and their internal policies. The worship of Yahweh in Judah was not just a matter of personal faith. It was a state-sponsored activity. The kings of Judah, starting from David and Solomon, were seen as the earthly representatives of Yahweh. They were believed to be anointed by Yahweh himself to rule over his people. This divine endorsement gave them not just political authority, but also religious authority. They were the custodians of the Yahwistic faith, responsible for maintaining the purity of its practices and upholding its principles. However, the relationship between Yahweh and the kings of Judah was not always harmonious. There were times when the kings, swayed by political expediency or personal ambition, deviated from the path of Yahwistic faith. They introduced foreign gods into the religious landscape of Judah, allowed syncretistic practices to creep into the worship of Yahweh, and even persecuted the prophets who dared to speak against their actions. These deviations were seen as acts of apostasy, betrayals of Yahweh that invited divine punishment. In the midst of these religious upheavals, the prophets emerged as the conscience of Judah. They were the voice of Yahweh, calling the people back to the true worship of their God. They denounced the idolatrous practices, condemned the social injustices, and warned of the dire consequences of abandoning Yahweh. Their words were not always welcome, but they were necessary. They were the beacon that guided the people of Judah back to Yahweh whenever they strayed from him. The worship of Yahweh in Judah was not a static phenomenon. It was a dynamic process that evolved over time. It was shaped by the historical experiences of the people, the theological reflections of the prophets, and the political decisions of the kings. It was a faith that was deeply rooted in the past, yet constantly adapting to the present. It was a faith that was fiercely monotheistic, yet open to the influences of the surrounding cultures. It was a faith that was profoundly personal, yet inextricably linked to the collective identity of the people. In the end, the worship of Yahweh in Judah was not just about the reverence of a deity. It was about the pursuit of a divine vision. It was about the quest for a society where justice prevailed, where righteousness was upheld, and where the divine and the human were in harmonious relationship. It was about the dream of a kingdom where Yahweh reigned supreme, not just in the religious sphere, but in every aspect of life. The kingdoms of Israel and Judah periodically warred or allied with each other until 722 BCE, when the Assyrians destroyed Israel and deported the inhabitants. Judah was able to withstand the Assyrian military campaigns, but only by paying tribute to Assyria. The Assyrian Empire fell to an invading force of Babylonians
Absolutely
when the Assyrians destroyed Israel and deported the inhabitants. Judah was able to withstand the Assyrian military campaigns, but only by paying tribute to Assyria. The Assyrian Empire fell to an invading force of Babylonians, Medes, and others in 612 BCE, and the Babylonians claimed the region of Canaan. In 598 BCE, they invaded Judah and sacked Jerusalem, destroying the Temple of Solomon and taking the leading citizens back to Babylon. This is the time in Jewish history known as the Babylonian captivity. Babylon was conquered by Cyrus the Great of the Persians, who allowed the Jewish leaders to return to their homeland in 538 BCE. During the Second Temple period, approximately 515 BCE to 70 CE, Judaism was revised, the Torah canonized, and a new understanding of the divine established, which today is known as monotheism, the belief in a single deity. At this time, scholars have established the older works, which eventually became the Hebrew Scriptures, were revised to reflect a monotheistic belief system among the Israelites far earlier than was actually practiced. In this polytheistic milieu, Yahweh was initially one among many. His domain was the wilderness and the storms, and his followers were likely a nomadic group who sought his protection and guidance. But as we have seen, Yahweh's influence and stature grew over time, eventually leading to his dominance in the Israelite religious landscape. However, this transition was not a straightforward or linear process. It was a complex and dynamic evolution marked by cultural exchanges, theological debates, and socio-political changes. The early Israelites lived in close proximity to other cultures and civilizations, and their religious beliefs and practices were undoubtedly influenced by these interactions. The Canaanites, for instance, had a rich and complex pantheon of gods and goddesses, with El as the supreme deity. The influence of the Canaanite religion on the early Israelite beliefs is evident in various aspects, including the use of the name El as a generic term for God in the Hebrew Bible. However, despite these influences, the Israelites maintained a distinct identity and belief system. They recognized Yahweh as their God, and their relationship with him was marked by a unique covenantal bond. This bond was not just a religious contract, but a defining feature of their communal and individual identities. And this is because we need to consider an important transformation regarding the name of Yahweh, which until now we have only touched upon but have not delved into. The fact that the name of Yahweh did not transition directly from polytheism to monotheism. Before that, it was revered within the context of henotheism. In the early days of the Israelite civilization, polytheism was the norm. The Israelites, like their Canaanite neighbors, worshipped a pantheon of gods, each with their unique domains and responsibilities. Yahweh, in this context, was one among many, albeit a significant one. However, as the Israelite society evolved, so did their religious beliefs. The shift from polytheism to henotheism marked a significant turning point in the Israelites' spiritual journey. Henotheism, a term coined by the renowned scholar Max Muller, refers to the worship of a single God, while not denying the existence or possible worship of other deities. In the context of ancient Israel, this meant that while the Israelites acknowledged the existence of other gods, they chose to worship Yahweh exclusively. This shift was not abrupt, but rather a gradual process influenced by various socio-political factors. The Israelites' transition to henotheism can be traced back to their interactions with neighboring civilizations. As they came into contact with different cultures and religious practices, the Israelites began to question their polytheistic beliefs. The worship of multiple gods, each with their distinct domains, seemed increasingly chaotic and disorganized. In contrast, the concept of a single supreme deity offered a sense of order and unity. Yahweh, with his strong association with the Israelites and his growing prominence in their religious practices, naturally emerged as the chosen deity. The Israelites began to view Yahweh not just as their God, but as the supreme God, superior to all others. This marked the beginning of their transition to henotheism.
Buy another pair of glasses until you've seen what this new invention.
This shift was not without its challenges. The Israelites had to reconcile their new belief in Yahweh's supremacy with their traditional polytheistic practices. This led to a unique blend of beliefs and practices. While Yahweh was revered as the supreme God, elements of polytheism persisted. For instance, the Israelites continued to acknowledge the existence of other gods, albeit in a diminished capacity. And that leads us to an important question. How does a god like Yahweh, a warrior god, just one among many others worshipped in those regions, become the only one and true God? In the ancient texts and inscriptions, we find intriguing clues that hint at this transformation. The ancient Israelites, who once revered a pantheon of deities, gradually began to focus their worship on Yahweh. This shift was not abrupt, but a gradual process that unfolded over centuries. When we delve deeper into the gradual process and transformation, we find evidence of alterations in the sacred texts. There were attempts to suppress the earlier beliefs, to erase the traces of the past. One such instance is found in the ancient texts where Asherah, a goddess who was once revered alongside Yahweh, was systematically removed from the religious narrative. The texts that once referred to Asherah as the consort of Yahweh were altered, reducing her to a mere sacred pillar or a wooden image. Yet the original texts tell a different story. In Deuteronomy 33, we find a passage that speaks of Yahweh coming from Sinai, accompanied by a divine presence. The original Hebrew text suggests that this divine presence was none other than Asherah. This revelation, though suppressed in later texts, provides a glimpse into the henotheistic beliefs of the ancient Israelites, and more than that, give us an attestation of the polytheistic structure of the biblical records and scriptures. Later in history, the monotheism of the Hebrew scriptures would be appropriated by the adherents of Christianity, who would continue veneration of Yahweh, eventually known as Jehovah, by Christian monks, and is commonly used today. The character and power of Yahweh were codified following the Babylonian captivity of the 6th century BCE, and the Hebrew scriptures were canonized during the Second Temple period, approximately 515 BCE to 70 CE, to include the concept of a Messiah whom Yahweh would send to the Jewish people to lead and redeem them. Yahweh as the all-powerful creator, preserver, and redeemer of the universe was then later developed by the early Christians as their God, who had sent his son Jesus as the promised Messiah, and Islam interpreted this same deity as Allah in their belief system. And finally, after the entire historical and theological journey we have undertaken, an important question concludes our journey in this video. Why do we venerate this biblical entity, forged in the depths of history, as a singular God? Why do we, as a society, continue to offer thanks, seek favors, and sing praises to this God? Perhaps we need courage to dive deeper within ourselves and understand who or what the gods are that hide behind the so-called sacred scriptures. This topic is essential for those who want to study in depth, and not superficially, the subject of the Anunnaki and the theory of ancient aliens. Understanding that Yahweh was never a single god, but was transformed into a single god throughout history, is fundamental for observing the extraterrestrial influence on the development of our civilization. At the end of this video, I want to invite you to realize that the evolution of Yahweh, from a god among others, to become the sole God revered worldwide, happened through two paths. The first one, from a human perspective. As we have been studying during this video, the shift from polytheism to monotheism in ancient Israel is a complex and gradual process that likely spanned several centuries. In the late Bronze Age, polytheism was the norm, and various deities were associated with powerful cities. Israel, for example, had its national god, Yahweh, but acknowledged a pantheon of deities, much like the other ancient Near Eastern states. There are numerous references to an assembly of deities consisting of both gods and goddesses, presided over by one deity, who was the head of the pantheon. As time passed, the perception of Yahweh began to change, transitioning from one of the gods to the head of the pantheon. In this phase, there was still no denial of the existence of other deities, but Yahweh assumed a more dominant role. This marks the beginning of a slow transition towards monotheism, where Yahweh was recognized as the national God of Israel, but other deities were increasingly considered non-entities, mere shams made of wood or stone. Eventually, the concept of monotheism was affirmed, and Yahweh alone was recognized as God. It's critical to remember that this transition was not a straightforward or sudden event. It involved a slow and complex process of reinterpretation and recontextualization of religious beliefs and practices over time. This gradual shift can be seen as a human-driven process, with changes in social, political, and cultural contexts playing a significant role. The second path, or the second perspective that I would like to present to you, and perhaps it is the fundamental one, regarding the studies proposed in the videos of this channel, is the theological transition of Yahweh to become the sole God. In reality, it is not the transition from a human perspective, but from the perspective of the gods themselves. If, in the ancient aliens theory, we understand aliens as real physical entities that visited our ancient past, we need to observe how one of them became the only and powerful God. We even need to question whether Yahweh was the name of a specific entity, or perhaps a denomination for a specific group of individuals. Therefore, we need to draw a connection between Yahweh, his name, and representation, and our main subject of study on this channel, the Anunnaki. This is because in all the regions where the name of Yahweh, El, Asherah, and other gods appeared, it is exactly the same regions where the Anunnaki appeared and were revered as gods. And in this case, we are not discussing anything related to the ancient aliens theory, but rather the historical and social perspective of those ancient civilizations. But now, evolving in this analysis based on the accounts from the gods themselves, we need to quickly explore the similarities between some of the most well-known Anunnaki entities and the characteristics of Yahweh himself. In future videos, we will do this in a more specific and detailed manner. Yahweh, in the earliest biblical literature, is portrayed as a typical ancient Near Eastern divine warrior, leading the heavenly army. He was a violent war god. Over time, he was promoted as the supreme god over all others in the pantheon. Yahweh was later seen as the creator of the cosmos and the true God of the entire world. The powers of blessing and salvation were fully embedded in Yahweh, and his will was communicated via oracle and prophetic vision or audition. Yahweh was, in essence, a father god. Let's now examine the Anunnaki gods Enki, Enlil, and Ninurta, and their similarities with Yahweh. Enlil, known as the god of weather and war, was considered the king of lands and the father of the gods. His actions in Sumerian mythology mirror some aspects of Yahweh. For example, Enlil tried to exterminate humans by sending a flood, a narrative that parallels the biblical story of Noah's Ark. Although many people associate Yahweh to Enlil, when we go deeper, we understand that this assumption may not be possible. The contrast between Yahweh and Enlil becomes even more pronounced when considering Yahweh's distinct attribute as a warrior. In the scriptures, Yahweh is depicted as a fierce warrior, akin to a hero marching into battle. Isaiah 42:13 echoes this sentiment by stating, "Yahweh goes forth like a warrior, like a hero. He whips up his rage, he shall roar and cry out, and over his enemies he shall prevail." Furthermore, the Song of Miriam in Numbers chapter 15 proclaims, "A warrior is Yahweh." The Bible consistently portrays Yahweh as the Lord of hosts, emphasizing his role as a commanding leader of a formidable army. Isaiah 13:4 boldly declares, "Yahweh, the Lord of hosts, a warring army commander."
How to stop wasting money.
The Mesopotamian records lack any indications or suggestions of Enlil possessing such a warrior-like image. But what about Enki? Enki, the god of knowledge, sciences, and hidden metals, possessed a unique combination of biological and mineralogical expertise. His mastery extended to the establishment of mining operations in southeastern Africa, making him the ultimate authority in that realm. These attributes closely aligned with those ascribed to Yahweh, the biblical deity. Proverbs affirmed that wisdom and understanding emanated from Yahweh's mouth, drawing a parallel to Enki's bestowal of unparalleled wisdom upon the wise Adapa. Yahweh himself declared ownership over gold and silver, while promising to grant treasures from dark and secret places. This intriguing passage can be read on Haggai 2:8. The story of the deluge serves as a prime example of the convergence between Mesopotamian and biblical narratives. In the Mesopotamian accounts, Enki takes extraordinary measures to warn Zusudra, his loyal follower, about the impending catastrophe. He provides precise instructions for building an ark, saving animal life, and ensuring the survival of humanity. In the Bible, it is Yahweh who fulfills these roles. Further evidence supporting the identification of Yahweh with Enki emerges when examining Enki's domains. According to Mesopotamian texts, Enki received dominion over Africa after the division of earth between the Enlilites and the Enkyites. The Apsu, the region renowned for its gold mines, became Enki's primary abode, alongside the city of Eridu in Sumer. We propose that the biblical term Apse Eretz, often translated as the ends of the earth, refers to this distant land, southern Africa to be precise. It is in this place, Apse Eretz, that Yahweh is said to exercise judgment and will rule upon Israel's restoration. Consequently, Yahweh can be equated with Enki in his role as the ruler of the Apsu. The similarities between Enki and Yahweh become more pronounced, perhaps even uncomfortable for the monotheistic Bible, when we encounter a passage in the book of Proverbs that exalts Yahweh's unsurpassed greatness through rhetorical questions. These questions touch upon divine acts such as ascending and descending from heaven, capturing the wind in one's hands, and binding waters as if with a cloak. Most crucially, the passage inquires about the one who established the Apse Eretz, and asks for the name of this entity and that of their son, if such knowledge can be obtained. In Mesopotamian sources, Enki allocated the Apsu to his son Nergal. The polytheistic flavor of asking about the ruler's name and that of their offspring can only be explained by inadvertently retaining a passage from the Sumerian original texts. This is akin to the earlier occurrence of us in phrases like, "Let us make the atom," and "Let us come down" in the Tower of Babel story. In Proverbs 34, the gloss substitutes Yahweh for Enki. So, was Yahweh essentially Enki garbed in biblical Hebrew attire? It would be overly simplistic to assert so. Examining the tale of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden reveals that while it is the Nahash, the serpent manifestation of Enki as the knower of biological secrets, who initiates Adam and Eve's acquisition of sexual knowledge necessary for procreation, he does not represent Yahweh. Instead, he serves as an antagonist to Yahweh, paralleling Enki's relationship with Enlil. In the Sumerian texts, Enlil coerces Enki into transferring some of the newly created primitive workers, intended for gold mining in the Apsu, to Eden in Mesopotamia, where they engage in farming and shepherding. In the Bible, it is Yahweh who places Adam in the Garden of Eden to tend and maintain it. Yahweh, not the serpent, assumes the role of the master of Eden, conversing with Adam and Eve, discovering their transgressions and expelling them. In all these aspects, the Bible equates Yahweh not with Enki, but with Enlil. Ninurta, son of Enlil, was revered as the god of agriculture, hunting, and war. His role in the epic poem Lugale shows him slaying a demon and using stones to build the Tigris and Euphrates rivers for irrigation. He is seen as a protector, much like Yahweh is in the Bible. Moreover, Ninurta's depiction as a formidable warrior deity, particularly beloved by the Assyrians, aligns with the representation of Yahweh as a divine warrior leading the heavenly army. Another intriguing parallel between Ninurta and the biblical Lord emerges from an inscription discovered during the reign of Ashurbanipal, the Assyrian king who once invaded Elam. In this inscription, Ninurta is referred to as the mysterious god who lingers in a secret place where no one can see what his divine being is about. The notion of an unseen god brings to mind the enigmatic nature often associated with the biblical Lord. However, it is important to note that Ninurta was not regarded as a deity in hiding by the earlier Sumerians, and depictions of him were not uncommon. Yet, as we explore the Yahweh-Ninurta connection further, we encounter a significant ancient text that sheds light on a momentous event, challenging the notion that Ninurta and Yahweh are one and the same. This particular text deals with a striking and unforgettable occurrence, whose specific details seem to indicate that Ninurta could not have been Yahweh. One of the most pivotal actions attributed to Yahweh in the Bible, with far-reaching consequences and enduring memories, is the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The event is recounted in Mesopotamian texts as well, allowing for a comparison of the deities involved. In the book of Genesis, chapter 19, Sodom and Gomorrah, cities situated in the lush plain south of the Sea of Salt, are depicted as wicked. Yahweh descends from his abode and, accompanied by two angels, visits Abram and his wife Sarai in their encampment near Hebron. After predicting that the elderly couple will have a son, Yahweh dispatches the two angels to Sodom to assess the extent of the city's sinfulness. Yahweh then informs Abram that if their sins are confirmed, the cities and their inhabitants will be destroyed. Abram pleads with Yahweh to spare Sodom if at least 50 righteous individuals are found within its walls. Yahweh agrees to the plea, after Abram successfully bargains the number down to 10 and departs. The angels, having witnessed the city's wickedness, warn Lot to take his family and flee. Lot requests permission to seek refuge in the mountains, and the angels consent, delaying the imminent destruction. Ultimately, the fateful doom of the cities is set in motion, as Yahweh rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah sulfurous fire, coming from Yahweh from the skies, and he upheavaled those cities and the whole plain and all the inhabitants thereof, and all that which grew upon the ground. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before Yahweh, and gazed in the direction of Sodom and Gomorrah, toward the land of the plain, and he beheld vapor arising from the earth as the smoke of a furnace. In Mesopotamian annals, this very event is extensively documented as the climax of Marduk's struggle to establish supremacy on Earth. The Mesopotamian text explicitly attributes the upheaval of the sinful cities to Nergal, not Ninurta. Considering that the Bible asserts that it was Yahweh himself who unleashed the destruction upon the cities, rather than the two angels sent to investigate, it becomes clear that Yahweh cannot be equated with Ninurta. In his book, Divine Encounters, Zecharia Sitchin grapples with the enigma of Yahweh's identity. In the end of the book, he wrote, "The biblical suggestion that the Elohim, the gods, or the Anunnaki, had a god seems totally incredible at first, but quite logical on reflection. At the very conclusion of our first book in the Earth Chronicles series, The 12th Planet, having told the story of the planet Nibiru, and how the Anunnaki, the biblical Nephilim, who had come to Earth from it, created mankind, we posed the following question. And if the Nephilim were the gods who created man on Earth, did evolution alone on the 12th planet create the Nephilim? Technologically advanced, capable hundreds of thousands of years before us to travel in space, arriving at a cosmological explanation for the creation of the solar system and, as we begin to do, to contemplate and understand the universe, the Anunnaki must have pondered their origins and arrived at what we call religion, their concept of God. Who created the Nephilim, the Anunnaki, on their planet? The Bible itself provides the answer. Yahweh, it states, was not just a great God, a great king over all of the Elohim. Psalms 95:3. He was there on Nibiru before they had come to be on it. Just as the Anunnaki had been on Earth before the atom, so Yahweh on Nibiru, Olam before the Anunnaki. The Creator preceded the created. In other words, Sitchin suggests that Yahweh is not an Anunnaki, but the divine entity worshipped by them. With all due respect to Zecharia Sitchin, I disagree with this view. And why? Well, the answer is very simple. You can understand the reason by rewatching this video. The name Yahweh appears to be not unique. It is mentioned all over the place. Yahweh is depicted as a warrior god, and for me, warrior gods do not align with the qualities of a divine, pure, infinite, and loving God. You can gain a deeper understanding of my reasons by watching the previously published video, The Trial of God. Now, let's return to our previous reflection to conclude this video. We have analyzed both perspectives surrounding the name Yahweh, the historical perspective from the human point of view, and the perspective of the gods themselves. These two different perspectives, these two paths of observation, the historical perspective and the perspective of the gods themselves, demonstrate the complexity of the subject and the interconnection that can be observed. Furthermore, we can also understand why the Anunnaki topic is so threatening, and the theory of ancient aliens can shatter the religious perceptions of a large part of the world. In general, our religions do not teach us the connection with the divine that dwells in all things. They do not encourage us to observe the divine in a waterfall, on a beach, on a mountain, in the stars, in the cosmos, in death and life, in joy as well as in sadness and anger. Of course, this is my own idea, but I observe God and His divine essence in everything. Religion, on the contrary, teaches us that God is present only through that specific entity, and that entity is distant in the heavens, observing our actions, punishing and threatening us, even though He, the all-powerful God, loves us. For me, the real search for the divine begins within ourselves and in the search for who is the God that speaks deeply within our being when we focus on ourselves. For me, the true religion is our inner self connected to the totality, and Yahweh, well, Yahweh, like other gods, deserves reverence for what they did in our past. They helped develop our civilization, our culture, shaped our bodies, and allowed life. And then, That's it. Let us not allow ourselves to worship any external entity beyond our own divine self.
There. Okay, you can see me and the video. So I'm back. It's kind of a long video. Oops, I'm just gonna get rid of this. There we go. So yeah, it was a long video. All his videos are long on the channel. I'm just gonna go over to his channel here and put it on this here. Yeah. So all of his videos are long. If you want to watch them, they're right here. Anunnaki series. It's I did put a link to this on my description of this video, so you should just be able to go in and click the link. It should work. But anyways, I've watched a number of the videos. I wanted to understand more about this Anunnaki and kind of wrap my head around it. It does parallel the Bible. The history's all there. And a lot of it makes sense. So I went down. I still have some work to do. But I watched movie 1, 2, and 3 to get an idea of the Anunnaki. Nibiru is this planet. I don't know if I said that right. Nibiru? Nibiru, I think is how they say it. But Nibiru, there is an Anunnaki, or there is a video he did on the planet Nibiru. Here it is, right above my head. So this one here, Ancient Aliens, Anunnaki, Lost Book of Enki, Tablet 1. That one, for some reason, I didn't watch. I wanted to get into the other stuff. But now I'm going to go back and watch the history on that. Now, what does a person make of all of this? It's kind of interesting. When you compare it with the Bible, there's a lot of parallels. The Stitchin believed that Yahweh was part of the divine, but yet the creator of this video said he doesn't believe that Yahweh is, because Yahweh, if you look at the Anunnaki's ancient mythology, there's different gods in charge of different things on earth. And so the short of the story is there's this planet Nibiru that has alien life on it. And Earth is here with life on it, like maybe apes and fish and things like that. Lots of different life on Earth. But on this other planet, there's advanced life. Now, all of this life, this advanced life, they also believe in a divine. They believe in a divine that's all around us, a divine that created the heavens and the earth, just like the Bible that you and I talk about, how it's written. So I think a lot of this got kind of blended in and streamlined into this book we call the Bible. But anyways, this Anunnaki race, they have a divine that they also worship. And on this planet, according to Stitchin's books, of course, and what these scholars are telling us, but on this planet, they have, and I don't know how much of this is fiction, by the way, because they call it a movie. And anytime they call something a movie, there's a bit of fiction in it. How much, but then they have the little documentaries. But anyways, you can read between the lines. The Watchtower, for that matter, is fiction. It's an illusion. The Watchtower put together an illusion based on what they read in the Bible. So is the Catholic Church, so is the Mormons, so is everyone else. So everyone is putting together an illusion. So anyways, we're going down this little trip here, this little road on the Anunnaki. But what I like about the Anunnaki is there's stone tablets. And they dug up some new stuff in 1957. So that's what's interesting me. This is like new light, if you want to call it that, new information. But it's written in stone. It's not some imaginary fictional book being released at the assembly this year at the convention. It's nothing like that. This is written in stone, and I think it's worth examining. So that's what I'm doing. Now, to give you the backstory in the Anunnaki, so you have this race of people that are advanced, and there's this planet Nibiru that circles at an oblong rate around the Earth every 3,600 years. And so the one Anunnaki, and so this planet had a hole in its atmosphere, just like our planet has a hole in the ozone. Well, this planet had a hole in their atmosphere. And it would circle a long ways out. And how did it stay warm? Well, they had volcanoes and they had a different atmosphere. And the volcanoes would keep it warm enough. And then they would have a warm period when it comes around the sun. But it's 3,600 years is one of their years. Now, they had this hole in the atmosphere. They were trying to, they had advanced weapons like nukes. And they were trying to nuke the volcanoes, and that didn't work. And so their science told them they could use gold dust. Gold dust spread up in the atmosphere would block the hole. And because when Nibiru came around by the sun, what do they call it? The sun throws out those sunspots. They throw out a lot of harsh energy. And it caused a hole in their atmosphere. So as they were coming around Earth, they stopped by Earth. It was quite a trip for them, but they flew to Earth. And there's a whole story around that. There's like a war going on Nibiru, the North between the South. It's this war, the North and the South. And you know the Bible talks about a war between the king of the North and the king of the South? Well, this is all on Nibiru, the war of the king of the North and the king of the South. It's been going on forever. Excuse me. Now, they came to Earth. And then eventually a bunch of them got to Earth. And the one Anunnaki that was on Earth, they brought in a lesser worker. They called them Ijijis. And they were working the gold mine to get this gold dust up to Nibiru. And there was a lot of gold on Earth. So it was a lot of work. So they said, well, let's just clone. Let's just make some, like making robots. Let's just clone some people out of the apes. We'll take that and we'll make them like us, in our image. So they did that. And there's quite a story. You'll have to watch a few movies to get through that. It's interesting how they created the atom, and wasn't a one-shot deal. And then the woman came later, and it did come from a rib. It's amazing how it all matches up. But it's looking at it from science, from like an alien race with advanced technology. So they used some of their own DNA. So some of their own DNA is in the monkey to make the man. And they finally made a man, and then they finally made a woman, and they made them so they could procreate, and they procreated a lot faster. Because one of those Anunnakis is about 350,000 of our years old. That's how old they are. They live a long time, and even longer. So, and then when they die, they say they go to the divine, and there's kind of two places. So then on their planet, they have like judges, a whole bunch of judges, and like a top god and like lesser ones. And they're always fighting too, just like on Earth, just a bunch of fighting, bunch of wars. So anyways, they create this man, and they're mining this gold. The man's doing really good, but the man multiplies a lot quicker, they notice, than them. But you remember, man was living like 300 years, but that's nothing compared to 350,000 years. That's what they live. They're advanced, but they're like men. But they show them in all the things with wings because they could fly. Not that, they had spaceships. They could fly with spaceships. They were advanced, and remember, man was primitive. But anyways, you'll have to watch a lot of it if this stuff interests you. But to me, it intrigued me because it all blended in with the Bible. And after 40 years of reading the Bible, the Bible's actually starting to make a bit more sense. So, long story short is they come to Earth, and the one God likes man. The flood was coming. And the flood wasn't that anybody made the flood, but maybe the God of the universe did. They actually talk about the God of the universe, the God of them, the Anunnaki. But you see, they became the God of man, this Enkill or whatever, this El. And he rode in the boat with Noah, and they had the DNA of all they decided to save the planet, this one God from the planet. And so within man is the divine from them So their DNA, which is the divine from God, and apparently God created them. The God of the universe. So it's kind of an interesting story. If you want to just look at it like a couple of movies, a couple of stories, you could look at it like that too. You can get lost in it. I found it interesting, but really, a lot of what we're looking at is just illusions, just stories, everything that we know to date. But that's it for today. I kind of went over time on my program. Thanks, you guys. You guys are a really good audience, and have fun with the research and come back and share it with me. And if you like, I could do more research on this. If you guys want, I could share more of this. But you know the drill. Till next time, keep living your life with love. Bye for now.